Good evening. Welcome to the Pat and Jeff Show. I'm your host, Pat, joined by my co-host, Jeff, and we're going to talk about Amelia Earhart. Jeff, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Patrick. Thanks for asking. All good here.
I have enjoyed looking into Amelia Earhart ever since Donald Trump did his famous Truth Social post, which is, this is pretty interesting stuff about Amelia Earhart. Wouldn't everybody be interested to find out about her final and fatal flight? Okay, here we are. So what I've done, Jeff, I've already gone ahead and recorded the readings for the Grunge article, but I figure we can just kind of summarize what the mainstream thinks of Amelia Earhart. From grunge.com, The Untold History of Amelia Earhart by Amber Petty and Jason Iannone, February 4th, 2023. Most people know that Amelia Earhart was a legendary pilot who mysteriously disappeared during her most daring journey. But the aviatrix was much more than that. In every aspect of her life, she fought against the strict gender roles of 1920s society. The fact that her disappearance was never solved is only one of the fascinating facts behind this record-breaking pioneer. She came from a broken home. Earhart learned early on that a woman's life can't revolve around a man. That sounds like a pretty obvious piece of advice, but for a girl living at the turn of the century, it was revolutionary. Earhart was born in 1897 and lived a happy life as a tomboy in Atchison, Kansas, until her dad, Edwin, picked up a new hobby: alcoholism. According to the book Amelia Earhart, Flying Solo, Earhart and her sister lived in constant fear of what their dad might do if he came home drunk. When Edwin decided that getting wasted was more important than supporting his family, Amelia's mother, Amy, moved the girls to Chicago to start over. Now, this isn't a single mother sob story. It's a daring move for Amy to leave her husband, but the family didn't end up destitute on the mean streets of Chicago. Amy had a healthy trust fund to keep the family afloat. According to Flying Solo, still, a teenaged Earhart saw firsthand that a woman can be the breadwinner and life goes on, whether you have a man or not. She was a nurse in World War I. Earhart was devoted to her studies in Chicago. Flying Solo explains that before she enrolled, Earhart had to check out every high school herself to make sure that her chemistry and physics programs were up to snuff. Earhart planned on continuing her education after high school until she saw the horrors of war. In 1917, Earhart went to visit her sister in Toronto and came face to face with the many wounded soldiers from World War I. Suddenly, her esoteric studies seemed frivolous. "I'd like to stay here and help in the hospitals," Earhart wrote to her mother. "I can't bear the thought of going back to school and being so useless." Though nursing was never on her radar, Earhart gave up everything to stay in Toronto for a year and help the wounded. It changed her life forever. While working as a nurse, Earhart would spend her few free hours in the airdrome, fascinated by the graceful yet fragile planes in the sky. Earhart left Toronto knowing that life was short and shouldn't be wasted. So she was going to fly. She studied pre-med at Columbia. After her year of nursing, Earhart said in her memoir that she developed an infection behind her cheek that had got bad enough to require surgery. She desperately needed rest, so it wasn't a great time to start a flying career. After so much time in hospitals as a nurse and a patient, Earhart wanted to study medicine and perhaps become a physician. In 1919, Earhart enrolled at Columbia University and began a pre-med program. She enjoyed her studies, but she soon began to wonder if she really wanted to be a doctor after all. Visions of medicine's applications floored me. For instance, I thought, among other possibilities, of sitting at the bedside of a hypochondriac and handing out innocuous sugar pellets. This picture made me feel inadequate and insincere, she wrote in her memoir. So after a year, Earhart ditched her doctor dreams and moved out to California. By 25, she bought her first plane. Once Earhart really committed to aviation, she didn't mess around. Earhart left Columbia in 1920 and got her flying license in 1921. Her flight instructor, Nita Snook, described Earhart as a natural flyer and a serious student. According to the book Amelia Earhart, The Sky's No Limit, Earhart bought her first plane in 1922 for $2,000. The bright yellow Kinner Airster, nicknamed the Canary, wasn't the most reliable piece of equipment. Snook described it as like a leaf in the air. With a 60 horsepower engine, it's not shocking that the Canary wouldn't win any awards for speed and stability. For perspective, your average Ford Focus has 160 horsepower, and one engine from a Boeing 777 puts out more than 110,000 horsepower. Still, Earhart loved her little plane and flew as often as possible. On one flight with Snook, a clogged cylinder in the Canary forced Earhart to crash into a line of trees. Snook crawled out of the wreckage to find Earhart pleasantly powdering her nose. "We have to look nice when the reporters come," she said. It was the beginning of Earhart's role as the face of female aviation. She broke records by crossing the Atlantic twice. Earhart got her big break when pilots Wilmer Stutz and Louis Slim Gordon planned a flight across the Atlantic and invited her along. She wouldn't get to fly the plane, but would be the first female passenger to cross the sea. Quite a feat for the time. If sitting on a plane doesn't sound like much, remember that flying in 1928 was a lot harder than boarding a flight on Southwest. In Earhart's book, Last Flight, she described a harrowing scene. In flight, a cabin door broke, and Earhart recalled Slim came within inches of falling out when the door suddenly slid open, and when I dived for that gasoline can edging towards the open door, I too had a narrow escape. However, a string tied through the leather thong in the door itself and fastened to a brace held it shut. The flight made it, and Earhart became a national celebrity. Still, Earhart wasn't content to win praise just for being a passenger. In 1932, she piloted her own plane across the Atlantic, the first woman to try the daring flight. At one point, she went into a vertical spin of 3,000 feet, according to Last Flight. How long we spun, I do not know. As we righted and held level again, through the blackness below, I could see the white caps too close for comfort. Earhart made it out alive and cemented her place in aviation history. She had the first celebrity fashion line and wrote for Cosmopolitan.
Woman has triumphed over the Atlantic. Safely landed in Ireland, Miss Amelia Earhart has achieved her long-cherished ambition. Taking off from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, she originally intended to fly to Paris, but trouble with her machine caused her to come down near Londonderry, where Mr. Hugh McLaughlin was the first person to greet her. The news of her success soon spread, and messages of congratulation poured in. After staying the first night in Londonderry, she flew on as a passenger next day to London. At Henworth, the American ambassador is present to greet her, still in her flying kit, since she carried no change of clothing and had only $20 in her pocket. And now, from the American embassy, where she is staying, she emerges on the morrow to go shopping, and to provide herself with feminine garments to replace the masculine attire in which she made her historic flight.
Earhart became America's beloved aviatrix. She was a huge celebrity, so she decided to leverage that power to make money for her upcoming flights. Known for her boyish flight wear, Earhart started a clothing line to give her style to the masses and build funds for her future adventures. Way before the Kardashians, Earhart pioneered the idea of a celebrity fashion designer. Her clothes were basically sportswear, though Earhart told journalists that she'd always add something characteristic of aviation, a parachute cord or tie or belt, or ball-bearing belt buckle wing bolts, and nuts for buttons. The clothing line was meant to give women across the country the freedom to move and find adventure. Cosmopolitan magazine jumped on the new flying frenzy. At the time, Cosmopolitan offered female advice that went beyond things to do in bed that'll drive him wild, and they made Earhart their aviation editor. Yes, they wanted enough material about aviation that they needed a full-time editor on staff. Earhart used her articles to answer questions about flying and to encourage girls to pursue aviation. Earhart cherished her opportunity to speak to a wide range of women about the field she loved so dearly. She had a secret wedding. Though Earhart was a self-driven woman determined to be a pioneer in flight, she had some help along the way from George Putnam. Putnam was a successful publisher and a married man who managed Earhart's career after her first transatlantic flight. The two worked together on her books and public appearances, and the friendship quickly developed into an affair. Putnam and his wife divorced, but Earhart didn't want to rush into marriage, according to an article in Connecticut magazine. Earhart wrote to a friend, "I am still unsold on marriage. I may not ever be able to see it except as a cage until I am unfit to work or fly or be active." That didn't stop Putnam from proposing. After his 6th attempt, Earhart gave him a letter detailing everything she needed in order to marry him, as explained by Slate. "I want you to understand I shall not hold you to any medieval code of faithfulness to me, nor shall I consider myself bound to you similarly." She continued, "Please let us not interfere with the other's work or play, and I must exact a cruel promise, and that is, you will let me go in a year if we find no happiness together." Putnam agreed to the terms, and according to Connecticut magazine, they married in a tiny secret ceremony in 1931. Though she eventually revealed her secret wedding, Earhart never took his last name or sacrificed her independence for marriage. Before her final trip, she declined a chance to learn a new navigation technique.
Amelia Earhart and her crew at Oakland, California, ready for her great aerial adventure, a round-the-world flight by way of the equator, a journey no pirate has yet attempted. The machine is heavy with extra petrol, and so the takeoff is the critical moment. A long run on the ground and a slow rise into the air, and she's away. That's perfect, but at Honolulu, on just such another takeoff, a tower burst and the plane crashed. Miraculously, no one was hurt, but it means at least a month's delay. Last tributes are paid to Sir Austin Chamberlain. Mr. Neville Chamberlain.
On Earhart's final flight, she and navigator Fred Noonan got lost somewhere over the Pacific Ocean and disappeared, never to be seen again. Leading up to the fatal flight, Earhart was given a chance to learn new techniques of navigation, but turned it down. Navy Lieutenant Commander Philip Van Horn Weems was an innovator in celestial navigation and taught his techniques to many pilots, including Charles Lindbergh. With his technique, a pilot would use a sextant and the sun or stars to get an accurate read of their position. That was worlds better than the nearly flying blind Lindbergh and others had had to do. After Earhart's first trans-global flight attempt crashed on takeoff and was a complete disaster, Weems reached out to offer his navigational knowledge. In a letter to the pilot, Weems pleaded for Earhart to study celestial navigation with him before making another around-the-world attempt, but Earhart wanted to get back in the air as soon as possible, so Putnam declined on her behalf, and Earhart began her last flight in June of 1937. There are lots of conspiracy theories around the disappearance.
Only a short time ago, Amelia Earhart checked over every detail of her $80,000 flying laboratory in preparation for her round-the-world flight. This was to have been her greatest achievement, a sky dash of 28,000 miles. With her husband, George Palmer Putnam on right, she discussed the hazardous course which had been plotted for her by Fred Noonan, the navigator who embarked with Miss Earhart upon this great flight, a flight which was to have marked her retirement to aeronautical research. Then to a waiting world came news of disaster as the plane failed to reach tiny Howland Island in mid-Pacific. A British freighter, the Coast Guard, and the Navy sped to the search, the battleship Colorado steaming out from Honolulu under forced draft. From California, the aircraft carrier Lexington, with 3,000 men and 72 planes aboard, races into the distant Pacific to join the greatest searching party in the history of aviation.
The nation was utterly shocked by Earhart's disappearance. It seemed impossible. Most people believe she got lost, ran out of gas, crashed into the ocean, but that theory was never confirmed. Without a concrete story for her disappearance, conspiracy theories ran rampant. For instance, some people believe that Earhart wasn't just a pilot, she was a spy hired by FDR to spy on the Japanese. Their theory is that Earhart crashed, the Japanese found out she was a spy and killed her. The fact that Earhart never got anywhere near Japan didn't seem to bother theorists. The 1943 Rosalind Russell movie about Earhart, Flight for Freedom, promoted the conspiracy theory further. Meanwhile, in the 1970 book Earhart Lives, the authors claim that Earhart's disappearance was just a ruse. According to the book, Earhart wanted out of the spotlight, so she faked her death and lived out her life in New Jersey as Irene Bolam. The big problem with that theory, of course, was the real Irene Bolam, who denied being Earhart and sued the book's publishers for $1.5 million. The suit was eventually withdrawn, and Bolam died in 1982. The theories don't end there. However, rumors also swirled about the Bermuda Triangle being to blame for her disappearance, but she never flew anywhere near the vile vortex. Of course, there's always aliens. Some think either by accident or through her work with the government, Earhart was whisked away to another planet. They did make a Star Trek Voyager episode out of that story, so it's at least the most entertaining of the theories. Did she survive as a hostage in Japan? Probably not, but let's take it from the top. As reported by NPR, producers of history's new documentary, Amelia Earhart, The Lost Evidence, said they uncovered an old photo of Amelia Earhart in the Japanese-controlled Marshall Islands. It shows people on a dock, including what appears to be a short-haired woman. Despite either crouching or sitting with her back to the camera, the producers argued this was Earhart, and the man on the far left was supposedly her navigator, Fred Noonan. They believe the Japanese found her on Mili Atoll Island and held her hostage on the Marshall Islands. What's more, according to the documentary, the U.S. might have known Earhart was a prisoner and still done nothing. From the start, this theory was widely criticized. Richard Gillespie, head of the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, thinks it's just random people on a dock. According to an early interview with The Guardian, he believed the woman's hair was too long to be Earhart's. Besides, his team has done multiple excavations of Kiribati Island, and he believes she crashed and died there. Meanwhile, the Japanese claim no records of Earhart as a prisoner. But the big nail in the coffin came a couple of weeks later. According to The Guardian, a Japanese military history blogger needed only 30 minutes to find the photo in a travel book that was published almost 2 years before Earhart's flight. Sorry, folks. The mystery is likely solved. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIGHAR, have been diligently researching the Earhart crash for years and believe the Earhart mystery is solved. According to their theory, she never actually crashed. Instead, she died a castaway on a deserted island. In 1940, 3 years after she disappeared, British authorities found a partial skeleton on Nikumaroro, a tiny island near Earhart's intended landing place. At the time, they ruled that the bones were male, but according to the Telegraph, TIGHAR consulted with a forensic imaging specialist, Jeff Glickman. By comparing the records of the bones, measurements, and photographs of Earhart, Glickman found that the bones were very likely a match for the missing pilot. Speaking with CNN, TIGHAR's executive director, Rick Gillespie, explained there are historical documents that prove official airlines received radio calls for help in 1937. If we look at the press of the time, people believe she was still alive. It was only when planes were sent to fly over the islands where the distress signals were coming from, and no plane was seen, that the searches shifted towards the ocean. So, where'd the plane go? According to TIGHAR's explanation, the plane was washed into the ocean from the reef with the tide. Moreover, rescuers did find signs of habitation on Nikumaroro. They assumed it was from the natives of the island, but in truth, it had been uninhabited since 1892. TIGHAR later excavated the site and found evidence of campfires, parts of a woman's shoe, and a box that once held a sextant, all matches for what Earhart had on the plane. Though we'll never know for sure, evidence seems to suggest that TIGHAR's castaway theory is true. Earhart wasn't a woman lost at sea, but a pioneer who struggled to stay alive in the darkest of circumstances. Which is, she came from a broken home. She was a war nurse in World War I. She studied pre-med at Columbia. She bought a plane for $2,000 with 60 horsepower. She broke records by crossing the Atlantic twice. She had a celebrity fashion line, the very first celebrity fashion line. She wrote for Cosmo, had a secret wedding to a super duper promoter named George Putnam. They agreed that their marriage was all a sham. And then there's this photo where clearly kinky. George is gay as hell. She might be gay herself. But there's that. And I don't believe any of this, of course. She had a new navigation technique she could have learned, but refused to. Nice setting that up. And then all the conspiracy theories around her. And then, the one about her dying as a hostage in Japan. And then there's one conspiracy theory that said they solved the mystery because they found her body on this one island. The end. And I think that kind of sums up what the mainstream narratives are about Amelia Earhart, which we can very quickly discard.
The weird part about this is it's been such a mystery for all this time, about 90 years. And the question is why? Why is this such a big deal? I've always thought about this, heard about it from time to time. Sometimes it would be brought up in the mainstream and then of course it would be dropped. But I don't understand why Trump would put out a post regarding Amelia Earhart, and the disclosure is more important than even the Epstein files. I mean, it's like, really? It's so bizarre. That was last Friday. So kind of piqued our interest here. So something going on, but I don't know exactly what. But the mainstream narrative just has a lot of holes in it too, though, like you say. It's just a lot of weird stuff. So I don't know if I buy it.
So now that we've kind of covered the grunge stuff, then there is this gentleman who argues that, let's see, where did I put that article? Not the Mystery Planet 1937. The truth about her intelligence mission. So this one is from a gentleman named Michael Shrimpton. And I'll just show this on screen. And then her intelligence mission. So now I'm going to, within the show, I'm going to splice in this article from Michael Shrimpton about how she was savagely executed by the Japanese, et cetera, et cetera. And there's your theory. From StuartJeanBramhall.com, Amelia Earhart, The Truth About Her Intelligence Mission, by Michael Shrimpton, July 8th, 2017. For those who know where to look, the truth about Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan was known long ago. It's summarized at pages 357 to 363, second edition of Spy Hunter. But I was building on earlier research by Fred Gerner, Captain Randall Brink, and others. U.S. Marines dug up their bodies on Saipan in 1944, at which point Admiral King ordered ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, to go into cover-up mode. King, who was, of course, a German agent, knew full well that Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan had been shot down and captured by the Japanese. The newly released photograph. I have not been involved in the NBC program, although I would not be surprised if my summary of the facts in Spy Hunter turns out to have prompted the rummage through the ONI archives. I have not, therefore, been shown an advance copy of the documentary, nor have I had an opportunity to study the photo under glass. I've used zoom, of course, but the published copies quickly lose detail under high zoom. The ship looks like the IJN Koshu, one of the two Japanese auxiliaries I name in Spy Hunter as being involved in the transfer of the Electra from the Mealy Atoll in the Marshall Islands to Taroa in the same group, where she was stored at the airfield there. The U.S. Army Air Force photographed the Electra minus an engine in 1944. The NBC photo is not, therefore, the first published photo of the Electra after she was shot down. NBC would not, of course, involve me, nor would they dare refer to Spy Hunter. The book is simply too hot for them and covers too many no-go areas for a mainstream media organization like NBC. As explained, I have not had a fair opportunity to study this photo. However, it looks genuine and is consistent with what we know about the shoot-down. I understand that facial recognition software has confirmed that the white man in the photo is Lieutenant Commander Fred Noonan. The young white woman has her back to the camera, but her build and clothing are consistent with the gallant Major Earhart. My preliminary analysis is that the photograph is probably genuine and shows the American flyers before they were transferred to Garapan Prison on Saipan. The aircraft is probably their modified Lockheed Model 10 Electra. Who took the photo? Spare a thought for the courageous American agent who took the photo. Everybody concentrates on what is ahead of the lens, i.e., depicted in the photo, not on what is behind the lens, i.e., the photographer. ONI had already lost several agents in the Japanese mandates by then. The man, it was probably a man, who took the photo was clearly doing so surreptitiously, hence the low angle. He must have known what was in store for him were he to be discovered. ONI knew that Amelia and Fred had been shot down, as their Mayday messages in both voice and Morse code had been intercepted in New Zealand, on board the great American aircraft carrier the USS Lexington CV-2, and by the light cruiser HMS Achilles of the New Zealand Division of the Royal Navy, which was racing to the rescue. As I explain in Spy Hunter, disgracefully, Amelia and Fred were left to swing in the wind. German assets in London and Washington hauled off the good guys. Achilles's logs were tampered with, but MI-18 had an asset on the Kiwi cruiser, a petty officer, so the cover-up failed. Achilles was a fine ship, by the way. She later performed splendidly in the Battle of the River Plate as part of Commodore Harwood's gallant little squadron, which saw off our community partner's pocket battleship KMS Graf Spee. I hope that the long-dead agent who took that photo 80 years ago is named and honored. He was undoubtedly following an instruction from his ONI handler to get down to the docks as the Jap transport came in. Time for the Japs to come clean. The time has now come for Tokyo to fess up. Like Watergate, the cover-up has become worse than the original crime, bad as it was. The executions by the Kempeitai of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were brutal and a serious breach of international humanitarian law. Even as understood in 1937, Amelia's was particularly brutal. The longer Tokyo hides its complicity, the more the present Japanese government associates itself with the policies of General Tojo and the other war criminals who ran Japan in the 30s and 40s. At the moment, the Japanese government are acting as accessories after the fact to these appalling crimes. If they want to disassociate themselves from them and carry on selling Toyotas, they'd better start telling the truth. Amelia and Fred weren't the only flyers the Japs executed out of hand. There are many examples to choose from, but I have chosen to honor the Royal Australian Air Force's only VC of World War II, Flight Lieutenant Bill Newton. Flying a Douglas Boston with 22 Squadron RAAF over New Guinea on March 17, 1943, Bill Newton ditched his aircraft in heroic circumstances, trying to save wounded crew members who could not bail out. He was brutally beheaded on March 29th. Next time you're in a Jap car showroom with money to spend on a new vehicle, remember the fate of Amelia Earhart, Fred Noonan, and Bill Newton. Walk on to the nearest dealer in American or British cars. You'll be driving away in a better product anyway. Amelia's mission. I've detailed Major Earhart's mission, that's right. She was a commissioned officer in the USAAC, U.S. Army Air Corps Reserves, in Spy Hunter. The Japs were fortifying their mandated territories in the Pacific as part of the buildup for their planned war of aggression against America, Britain, and the Netherlands. The U.S. Navy badly needed to know what facilities the Japs were building. The Lockheed Skunk Works, as they became known at Burbank, California, fitted Fairchild high-resolution cameras to a highly modified Model 10 Electra. Amelia skillfully crashed her existing Model 10, which lacked the speed and endurance of the new machine on takeoff, justifying a trip to see the boys at Lockheed. With CAB approval, the registration numbers were swapped over. Amelia and Fred were instructed to fly west-east. Their original plan called for east-west. Overtook in the Carolines and suspected Jap bases in the Marshalls. Their destination was Camden Island, where ONI officers were waiting to retrieve the precious film. The overflight was sanctioned by President Roosevelt. Roosevelt, however, did not know that the German Abwehr had heavily penetrated ONI. Their man, Captain Ernest King, betrayed the mission to Berlin, who in turn shopped it to their allies in Tokyo. The IJN, Imperial Japanese Navy, lay in wait. Poor Amelia and Fred were intercepted by Mitsubishi A-5M Claudes, probably sortied from the carrier Akagi. She was officially in refit, but as I explained in Spy Hunter, there is a major discrepancy in her official story. There is no known photo of the Akagi in dry dock in July 37, and her refit took much longer than her half-sister Kaga. The Claudes were under orders to force the Electra down if possible. Amelia seems to have lost her number one port engine, and with her plane on fire, had no option but to ditch off Mealy Atoll. After being taken to Saipan, Fred threw feces in the face of a Kempeitai NCO, non-commissioned officer, who then lost his rag and executed him. Amelia was shot some months later on orders from Tokyo by Fred's open grave. The manner of her execution was designed to cause her maximum distress. Since both bodies were recovered by the U.S. Marine Corps, it should still be possible to retrieve them. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan should be honored with a state funeral, with a fly past by the U.S. Air Force, United States Marine Corps, and United States Navy. Okay, now this one, what are your thoughts on the Japanese intelligence mission theory?
It just doesn't make sense to me. But they would use this, this story about her being this aviator, just trying to fly around the world, and using her for reconnaissance. It just doesn't add up. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. But the article is very well written. The guy Michael Shrimpton, whoever he is or was, very compelling in the way he writes. I love how he constantly calls them the Japs. I think we need to get back to that. It's just shorthand for Japanese. There's nothing wrong with that. We got calling us the Yankees or the Yanks. Anyway, so there's that one. But I want to talk more about what they might call the more out there conspiracy theories. The first one being this Irene Bolam conspiracy theory. And I haven't recorded this one, but it's called, the domain name is just irene-amelia.com. And we can just go through it. So one of the things you're going to see here first is that what they do is they give you some photos, and then they figure out a way to make you think they're the same person. So here we are, Amelia Earhart, a digital composite. And then post-1940, this is only Irene Bolam, otherwise known as Irene O'Crowley Cragmile or Craigmile. I feel like you can take photos of almost anybody and do this with it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't really place a lot of value in the photos in this case. It's really more the story. And when you think about it, supposedly this person was part of a friendship, like a little circle that Amelia Earhart had in the early 30s. And this Irene Craigmile, whatever her name is, was a woman aviator also in this little small circle. And all of a sudden, she just disappears, like in the mid to late 30s. And you never hear anything about her. You can't follow her anywhere. You don't know what's going on with her. And yet the name appears again after the 1940s, early 40s. So to me, the story is more valid than the composite photos and that sort of thing. But I do obviously see a resemblance from.
In this photo, yeah, it's not like it's interesting, no question.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really need the digital composite in between those two photos to say, hey, they look a lot alike. I mean, I'm not an idiot. I can see it, right?
Very true.
So it's like, yeah. But still, there's something weird about the story. So I kind of think something's going on. And it does make sense that potentially Amelia Earhart never disappeared. She may have disappeared for a short period of time, but she lived her life out and became an older person. I think that's probably true.
So here's this article from irene-amelia.com. Irene O'Crowley, or possibly O'Crowley Craigmile, was a 20th century person who had known Amelia Earhart. This individual, shown in 1977, was only identified as Irene O'Crowley Craigmile from the 1940s on because she was not the original Irene O'Crowley Craigmile. She's not the original, whatever the hell that means. We're about to find out, so I'm glad about that. New research confirmed that the person above, this woman, did not appear anywhere as Irene prior to the 1940s. As well, the results issued by a forensic comparison analysis have now made the former identity of the post-1940 only Irene displayed above easy to recognize. Jeff, what do you got? What is this trying to say?
You know, I just think it's trying to say that this person existed, but then I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, really? I don't know.
I don't know. It's kind of word salad if you read this sentence.
Yeah.
So let's keep going. In 1965, it was first suspected that the distinguished-looking person who was known as Irene O'Crowley Craigmile from the 1940s on had previously gone by the name of Amelia Earhart. In 1970, she was publicly accused of being the former Amelia Earhart, yet she denied it within the context of a national news story, and people were quick to believe her. At the time, few bothered to evaluate the full basis of the accusation, nor did it register to anyone that the question that asked if the post-1940s only Irene was or wasn't the once world-famous pilot going by a different name somehow missed being forensically addressed. Keep going to learn more. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's a weird article. This thing goes on and on and on. But the point is this: the real question is not did Amelia Earhart fly, then disappear, and then show up as another person? That's one question. But the bigger question is why? I mean, to me, that's the bigger question. Why did she have to do this?
But why you can't answer why until you figure out what first. That's how I look at these things. And what I do know is that we always see this Hegelian dialectic between a mainstream report and then the alternative, otherwise known as the conspiracy theory, and then something in between, because the conspiracy theory was a head fake. Problem, reaction, solution. And the solution, the truth, is never the mainstream, and it's never the alternative. That's my working. That's how I work with stuff now. So we've got the mainstream stuff, which you get from the grunge article. You've got the one alternative, which is no, she died. Well, I guess you could say the Japanese capturing her is the mainstream theory at this point, is it not?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that's really what grunge was saying too, is that basically that is the mainstream narrative. Okay,
so that's false. But we do cover it in the grunge article, so it's there for you to look at. And that exact same mainstream narrative is covered by this Michael Shrimpton, that she was savagely shot by the Japanese designed in a way to maximize her physical discomfort because Japs are bad. I think that was the basic gist of that. Now, this alternative conspiracy theory that she is Irene Bolam. So from my perspective, I'm going to look at this as the off the beaten path misdirection theory. And I could be totally wrong about that. This could be the real thing. I don't know. But there's a bunch of cool stuff going on here. You know, people have been writing stuff about Amelia Earhart forever. You got...
But, you know, one of the things that places a little bit of some theory that makes me believe there's more to the story is that even in this article and in the other articles, they mention that her husband, whether it was a real marriage or not, George Putnam, actually set her up to be a spokesperson for TWA Airlines. I thought that was interesting. And, you know, that links potentially Amelia Earhart to Howard Hughes. And then also, remember, we spoke about this last time, that Howard Hughes flew out of Burbank Airport in Glendale, California. And so did Amelia Earhart. And it was right around the same time that Howard Hughes was beginning to, test aviation and stuff. So I have a feeling, I'm not suggesting Amelia Earhart was Howard Hughes. I'm not suggesting that.
No.
But I am thinking that there was a potential relationship there that could speak to maybe some military intelligence stuff going on. And I'm not talking about reconnaissance flights over Japan, maybe other things, but who knows? That's kind of my working theory. But we'll see.
All right. So regarding these 6 books, let me make sure that we don't get anything. What do you think about this stuff? This Todd Swindell.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to read because he's an author, right? But it's so poorly written. It's so hard to understand it. It goes back and forth. But he's definitely trying to suggest there's tons of evidence that Irene Bolam was actually Amelia Earhart. I think that's his argument. And he gives a lot of evidence. And he also shows in this article, he shows that the 3 ladies, I forgot the other third lady, but Amelia Earhart and the original Irene Crowley Craigmile, strange name, that she actually, they were friends, and there was this small little circle of these 3 ladies who were getting into aviation in the early 1930s. But then that Irene, the original Irene, according to this gentleman, the original Irene disappears. And they don't look anything alike, by the way. It's not like they could be doppelgangers. They're not. They don't look anything alike.
Amelia Earhart and Viola Gentry.
Viola Gentry was the third lady in this circle. Correct. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So Amelia Earhart, 1931, next to a Pitcairn auto gyro. She flew, sponsored by Beechnut Gum. It's pretty cool. Auto gyro. Okay. So from the digital comparison sections of a forensic research analysis that deeply examined the life stories of three 1930s flying pals, Amelia Earhart, Viola Gentry, and Irene O'Crowley Craigmile, the post-1940 only Irene's image and Amelia's image are shown together here in another digital composite. All right, here we are. Amelia Earhart, 1937. Here she is. Begins. So this is just transitioning from one to the other. There's Amelia. Amelia. Digitally transitioning to post-1940 Irene.
It's hard to dispute that. It really is.
That's pretty compelling.
Yeah, I mean, just from the teeth alone, it's like, geez. Let alone, the nose is a little fatter, and her face is.
Everybody's nose gets a little fatter with time.
Yeah. So that does.
I can't believe the hair. It's like the hair is believable. The eye, the tear troughs. The freaking. It's like I'm being punked here, dude. I feel like somebody's trying to produce an orgy of evidence, because if that photo of Irene is not in any way doctored, nor the photo of Earhart in 1937, then I kind of want to close this case. But still, it's so compelling.
And you would think if she was going to try to hide out post-1940s as this Irene Craigmile Bolam, that she would change her appearance a little bit. Like, why would she wear her hair the same exact way? See, that part to me, it just, it's just kind of weird. It's also, kind of weird. Like, you see these
Challenger astronauts, man, they can hide them in plain sight.
It's just weird. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I hear you. Yeah. All right. The comprehensive Amelia Earhart and Irene O'Crowley Craigmile forensic research study and comparison analysis not only surfaced the reality of more than one 20th century person having been attributed to the same Irene O'Crowley Craigmile identity, so two of these chicks, it also left no doubt that the post-1940 only Irene Craigmile, previously known as Amelia Earhart. Okay, this person needs to learn how to write. Holy crap. Keep going to learn more. All right.
Please.
And this photo right here, that's the same photo. Okay. This is a photo by Joseph A. Gervais. Yes, he is Ricky Gervais's father.
No.
So there's that. East Hampton, New York. After she married Guy Bolam of England in 1958, she became known as Irene Bolam. The forensic study learned that she appeared nowhere identified as Irene prior to the 1940s, blah, blah, blah. I like it. I like the theory. Now, Miles Mathis disagrees. And other than the fact that Miles Mathis is going to identify everybody involved as a crypto Jew, which is fine. Maybe. But he has good forensic evidence as well. Or maybe not. Let's find out together, shall we? I can summarize the Mathis paper, actually. You know why? Because I downloaded the PDF and I asked ChatGPT to summarize it for me. So let's just look at the ChatGPT summary. Hold for processing. All right, core claim. So the title of the Miles Mathis paper is Amelia Earhart Faked Her Death, but Not as Irene Bolam. He wrote this in 2021. Core claim. Mathis argues that Amelia Earhart's disappearance was staged He rejects the popular theory that she assumed the identity of Irene Bolam, instead proposing that Earhart lived on under the identity of her sister Muriel. Key points. Family background. Earhart, originally Earhart, came from a wealthy crypto-Jewish family of bankers linked to the Otises, Pomeroys, Pattons, and other elite families. Mathis emphasizes genealogical connections tying Earhart to powerful political, military, and cultural figures. 2. Career as manufactured publicity. Earhart's fame was orchestrated by George Putnam, a publisher and PR man, after Lindbergh's staged flight to create a female aviation icon. Her first transatlantic flight was as baggage or a passenger. Her solo flights were staged or falsified. Mathis highlights inconsistencies. She refers to herself as a sack of potatoes on that flight. Improbable routes, odd witnesses, and connections to surnames like Sawyer and Cecil. And that's actually pretty cool. We'll get to that in a second. 3, hoaxed flights. He claims her solo transatlantic and round-the-world flights were impossible or never happened. The crash at Luke Field, Hawaii, 1937, was staged, not an accident. The Navy's search for her was a fabricated Hollywood production that conveniently wasted taxpayer money while enriching insiders. The real disappearance. Mathis suggests Earhart didn't die at sea or in Japanese custody. Instead, she refused further participation in Putnam's PR stunts, retired around age 40, rebranded herself as her sister, Muriel Earhart. He compares this tactic to other supposed faked deaths and identity swaps: Nicole Simpson, Sharon Tate, Dorothy Stratton. Mathis is fun. 5, Muriel Earhart is Amelia. Mathis points to photos, paintings, and biographies of Muriel after 1937, noting that Muriel only became a public figure after Amelia Earhart's death. Muriel handled Amelia's legacy, wrote books, even had a Lockheed Electra named after her. Mathis interprets this as proof Muriel was Amelia. Joni Mitchell's 1976 song Amelia was a coded confession. He interprets the album title Hegira, meaning life change or flight, as symbolic of Amelia's transition into Muriel, dismissal of other theories, etc., etc. Okay, so that makes me want to take a look. And we'll just do it. What do you think so far?
It's a plausible theory, what this gentleman is laying out, and he does have pretty decent evidence. So, again, we just talked about this earlier. You're desperate to find the why. I'm desperate to find the why. That's the question.
But you can't. Okay, so why? Okay, let's fine tune this.
Sure.
You're desperate to find the why. But the why what?
Well, here's the thing. We know there's a story around this woman. The question is, why is there a story around her? Why is she important to the story? Because they would not have, the mainstream media, nor Trump, potentially the White Hats, would have created the buzz around this without them wanting us to talk about it. It's no different than the medbed proclamation from Trump this week or over the weekend. It's like, why does he bring that up and then take it away? Because he wants us to talk about it, or they want us to talk about it. So they want us to talk about this. They want us to bring this to the forefront. I have some other theories that aren't even presented in any of these articles, and we can talk about that in a little bit. And I might even have not evidence, but some circumstantial evidence that would suggest that maybe my theory is correct too.
What is your theory?
Oh, okay. Funny you should ask. Okay. So what I'm thinking is that, I believe, and people who have listened to me discuss these things in these previous episodes and whatever, and even call and show to Dave and open lines. I believe the Q operation is a lot older than Trump, or goes further back than even Kennedy. I think Howard Hughes was a part of it. I think Tesla was a part of it, or the person known as Tesla, whoever that really was, that story. And I believe it might go back as far as Lincoln. But my point is this, and I really believe it. I think she might have been an agent for Q. She was reportedly friendly with Eleanor Roosevelt. Maybe that was her way into the cabal. I don't know. This George Putnam relationship, the fact that they were together, this guy was this marketing PR genius guy. Probably, I mean, he has all the signs of being a potential, Kabbalist himself. I don't know. I didn't do the research around him. But maybe so she was brought in to be this, they created this story around her so she can truly do reconnaissance, but not on the Japanese, but on the Cabal. And then it might have gotten close and they had to disappear her and take her out. The good guys, so that she wouldn't be destroyed or be killed or whatever.
I'm trying to find the Earhart post on Truth Social from Trump. His exact words might be.
Yeah, it was September 26th at like 1:42 p.m. It was weird. And I didn't know if it tied to a drop or not. I don't know. But the other weird part about this is that, remember, her Macy's line was a very, very modern line for women back in the early 1930s. I mean, she introduced separates and all sorts of, interesting ideas. Her hair was always short. I mean, there might be some other reasons for that too, which we don't have to get into. But yeah, let's talk about this post because this is important.
All right. I have been asked by many people about the life and times of Amelia Earhart. Such an interesting story. And would I consider declassifying and releasing everything about her, in particular, her last fatal flight? She was an aviation pioneer, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean and achieved many other aviation firsts. She disappeared in the South Pacific while trying to become the first woman to fly around the world. Amelia made it almost 3/4 around the world before she suddenly, and without notice, vanished, never to be seen again. Her disappearance almost 90 years ago has captivated millions. I am ordering my administration to declassify and release all government records related to Amelia Earhart's final trip and everything else about her. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. Okay, so where's the freaking stuff? You told him to declassify and release. Where is it?
I don't know. Good question.
What a bunch of crap. All right.
Yeah, but all right, so let's go back to another thing that's pretty well known. Amelia Earhart was also had a relationship with Charles Lindbergh, right? Now, we know the Lindbergh story is really interesting because, obviously the baby was kidnapped and all that kind of stuff, right? That Lindbergh story. Plus, he was a supporter of Hitler, and he didn't want he wanted the Americans, the U.S. to go on the side of the Germans. Now, nobody ever explained that theory. Why did he take that position? But it's a known position that this American hero who flew, across the Atlantic and great time. I mean, what was it? Who did the movie? The tall, funny guy did the movie about his story, the Charles Lindbergh story.
I don't know.
The actor, the famous actor. I can't think of his name. But the famous actor is fabulous. But anyway, separate story. They do this whole great story. And then it turns out that the guy is trying to sell out America and he's a Nazi lover and he wants to support Hitler. I mean, there's some weird stuff about this. And the fact that Amelia Earhart was friendly with Lindbergh and Lindbergh's child goes missing, there's more to this than we think. More to this than we know.
Yeah.
Clearly. And I think it's all tied together. I think it's tied together with Howard Hughes. I think L. Ron Hubbard is. There's all, but the stuff comes together. There's a reason why we brought all this stuff together because it goes together. I think.
It's pretty exciting. Okay.
I know, but you can't deny it. I mean, I know it's stretchy in Joe's terms, right? Again, I'm very stretchy, and I get that. But it just in my gut it resonates for some reason that all these people were acquaintances and they meet each other in history throughout this timeline, and there must be a reason why. There has to be. Too circumstantial. I mean, that's not the right word. It's too coincidental that it would. There's no such thing as coincidences, right? We've learned this.
There are no, or as Steve Bannon likes to say it, maddeningly, if you ask me, there are no conspiracies, but there's also no coincidences. Okay, bro. Well, then what are there?
Right. What else is left?
I know you just made it. You just destroyed all of reality. Thanks, bro. How very Irish of you.
But-
Okay.
And,
So
and then there's always a real stretchy theory, which we can talk about later. Let's talk a little bit more, and then I'll give that as my final thoughts because I
okay,
don't
good.
want to.
Yeah. What is the current alternative theory, though? So we can hit Miles Mathis, but we kind of summarized him. I don't know what's left.
I think we've shown everything that we know about, at least so far, about this person, this aviator, supposedly. She probably never even flew as a pilot. Who knows?
So let's just do a little bit of Miles Mathis right quick, and then we'll get to what you think, or one of your luxury theories, I guess you might call it. So while in England, Earhart bought Lady Mary Heath's Avro Avian and had it shipped back to the U.S. So she must have been making a mint as an aviation writer for that small Boston paper. For being a sack of potatoes, she was just a passenger. Earhart was given a ticker tape parade and a personal meeting with the president. The press called her Lady Lindy and the Queen of the Air. She was used in a multitude of advertising campaigns, including for cigarettes. She promoted her own fashion line for Macy's. You're getting the picture. Her career was all staged, manufactured by the usual people, Jews, for the usual reasons. Nothing was real. For her work in being baggage, she was made a representative of TWA and a vice president of National Airways, later Northeast. As part of this promotion, Putnam, this guy, and his pet, just making sure that we all remember that one, Putnam, married her, although they admit it was all a setup. There was hardly a wedding and no honeymoon. They lived separately. She didn't take his name. They had no children. He obviously married her to quash the gay rumor, perhaps the better to control her career and money. For the next part of the hoax, Putnam and Earhart faked her solo transatlantic flight, not to be outdone by Lindbergh. It was supposedly made in this tiny plane. I don't think I have a very good idea of the scale of that plane because there's no human standing next to it. But given what you see with this little model, I don't know. It's tiny. All right. So anyway, Miles Mathis says, not a chance that actually happened. There was no reason to do it in a dangerous little single engine plane like that. There's nowhere on that plane to store all the required gas anyway. Heading for Paris, she allegedly landed in a pasture in Derry, Ireland after less than 15 hours. Her landing was allegedly witnessed by only 2 people. One of them was named T. Sawyer, as in Tom Sawyer, to go with her Huck Finn look. It's hard to believe they still expect people to buy this story. The first transatlantic flight by a woman, and no one sees her take off or land, no pictures or film. We just have to take George Putnam's word for it. Here she is with Putnam. How weird is that? Was she his dog? They just need a leash. The other person who allegedly saw Earhart land was Cecil King. George Putnam just happened to be descended from kings. The town nearest this dairy pasture was Culmore, which is curious since it isn't anywhere near the western coast of Ireland. It is north of Londonderry, more than 50 miles east of the western coasts of Donegal. So not a logical or likely place to be landing after 15 hours. And it goes without saying, nowhere near any line to Paris. This is about 150 miles too far north to be on any line to Paris. So George Putnam must have chosen this site for his fake landing for another reason. To discover it, all we have to do is go to the wiki page for Culmore, which lists its most famous citizen as the Baron d'Ocra, involved in O'Doherty's rebellion in 1608. Another involved was Captain Henry Hart. Well, George Putnam had many links to the fake Salem witch trials through not only the Putnams, but also the Hawks, Hutchinsons, Ingalls, and Harts. See Elizabeth Hutchinson Hart He is linked to that hoax in many lines of his genealogy, but he also had links to Derry through these same Harts. So that is why he chose Culmore. He probably had cousins who owned that land. That is the way it normally works, as we saw with Buddy Holly. Putnam was also a Huxley, a Bosworth, and a Gould, previously Gold/Golding. The Docras were also Goldings. These Goldings also link us to the De Veres, Earls of Oxford, as well as to the Cecils. So that is where Putnam took the name Cecil for his story. The Docras became the Docrays and married the Rathbones, connecting us to the fake Lincoln assassination.
Was that an exhausting article? It was just, I mean,
That's an exhausting paragraph.
I know. It was crazy. I mean, the other article we found was just kind of poorly written. It had interesting information. This guy writes well, but the information is just like
Incredibly dense. The Buddy Holly stuff. You know, the genealogies I find the least compelling because it's just you're scattergunning names, and there could be something to it, but it's just going to be uncompelling to me because documentation is so easy to just completely muddle.
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that because part of the genealogy of Amelia Earhart, somebody finds that her great-grandfather was a Patton, but it's not the same Patton line, or at least it wasn't the same the grandparents or the great-great-parents, I can't say it, but of George Patton. So it was kind of weird. So the genealogy stuff sometimes is very kind of awkward, and it can be even more because if you don't pay enough attention, the names are very, very similar, but the dates don't match up and that kind of thing. So I didn't see that connection. It was posted, and there were a lot of posts and stuff. A lot of people talking about this since the Trump Friday, the 26th mention of Amelia Earhart over the weekend, and even up to a few days ago. But it's like some of it just didn't connect. But I get you with your analysis of the genealogy. And in the end, aren't we all connected anyway? In the end,
Every single one of us is a descendant of Charlemagne. No exceptions. Well, at least all the whites are descendants of Charlemagne. And there's no getting around that because of just pure numbers. So when somebody says this person's a descendant of this king, yeah, so what? So am I. A direct descendant, by the way, if you count mothers as being direct. So I'm over it when it comes to that. When some conspiracy theorist figures out that Barack Obama and George W. Bush are 11th cousins, they need to understand exactly what kind of distant relationship 11th cousins means. It means 11 generations ago, they share one common ancestor. Well, 2 to the 11th power, because that's what you get. You know, you got 2 parents. That's 1 generation back. 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents. So when you go 11 generations back, you're at 2 to the 11th. 2 to the 11th is 2,048. You share one of them, and you're 11th cousins. Dude, my wife and I are 13th cousins. I figured that out. It wasn't even that hard using the software of today. My mother and father were 22nd cousins. They were both direct descendants of Llewellyn the Great of Wales because the guy fucked everything that moved. They had like 47 kids or something. So you can really find common ancestry if you just get autistic with the Ancestry.com and Jenny.com websites. Anyway, I digress. However, I do see Amelia Earhart being a fake creation just like everybody else. Anyway, what is your final theory on this stuff? Because we don't really have like a definitive theory.
Okay, so my working theory is what I stated earlier, that I think she was an agent for Q. I think she was digging up information on the cabal, going deeply into the presidencies and friendly with the Roosevelts and all this kind of stuff. Okay, fair enough. That's my working theory. That I think. But my out there theory, my most distant one, was if you remember on April 14th of 2025, that Michael Kratsios, he was the chief technology officer in Trump's first term and was appointed to lead the Office of Science and Technology Policy in 2025, stated that American technology can manipulate time and space and bend time. So
we got to find that.
With that said, he's basically saying time is not linear. And I don't know what that means, but he's saying that, okay? And he's saying that we can time travel, is what he's saying. Now, Amelia Earhart had the short haircut. She did these apparel lines for Macy's that were very progressive. I mean, into the future, way into the future. And actually, it didn't sell that well. And they discontinued the line, I think, after 6 months. No surprise, but it was right after the Depression. Who the hell's buying clothing? But interestingly enough, she made patterns so that people can make their own based on her designs. So that was interesting. But nonetheless, could she be a time traveler? I don't know.
I love every single bit of that.
Yeah, could very well be. So there you go.
Amazing. I love every bit of this. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for watching today with the Pat and Jeff show. We left things kind of open-ended with Amelia Earhart because, let's face it, there is no definitive answer yet where she is concerned. Our sources, of course, grunge.com for mainstream stuff, and then alternative mainstream also being from the Spy Hunter magazine, and then, of course, Miles Mathis and the Irene-Amelia.com website being the alternative conspiracy theory. It's all fantastic, and I can't wait for the stuff to get released. In the meantime, guys, hit the thumbs up on this video. Go to tulipblooms.shop. Use promo code Shapiro for 10% off to get your hands on some of the best skincare products in the world and the amazing Tulip Soothe Balm, which is changing lives even as we speak. I can't get enough of it. Anyway, Jeff, is there anything that you... follow me on Twitter, pgunnels1. Follow me here on this channel, Rumble, just pgunnels, and hit thumbs up and share with your friends, etc. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, just keep your eyes and ears open and your mind clear, because there's all sorts of stuff coming our way. It's going to be all clarified in due time. So sit tight.
Absolutely. All right. I am going to go ahead and finish the show with the Joni Mitchell 1976 song Amelia, which I hope you will enjoy, because Miles Mathis took it as confession that Amelia faked her death. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time. Bye, guys.